Rules. Society needs rules. Right? After all, in Rousseau's social contract, he says that from birth we have all implicitly agreed upon these rules in order to enter society. The Netherlands is one of the most rule-abiding countries in the world. They even have a saying, just do normal, that's crazy enough. Now, there are very many good things about a rule-based society. For starters, here in the Netherlands, when you cross the street, the drivers actually respect the zebra. In Germany, the Autobahn is only possible because the drivers actually respect other drivers. And I can guarantee you one thing, the trams will always be on time in Amsterdam. Now behind me stands the dark side of a rule-based society. The house with a pole is Anne Frank's house, where for 2 years she evaded Nazi capture until eventually, though, they found her and put her into a concentration camp. Now most people would say that was the pinnacle of evil, and yet most of those anti-Semitic policies were actually employed by local governments. In Netherlands, the rule-based societies at that time saw it just as a law, right? If there's a government edict, it must be followed. And many people did. Many people reported a lot of Jews who used to be colleagues to the Gestapo simply because it was a law. The pandemic saw something very, very similar, especially in Western Europe, where the lockdowns were the most restrictive, shut down these small bars and restaurants. People had to show a QR code in order to get a table. Society was segregated between those who were vaccinated and unvaccinated. Friends and family were ratting each other out whether they had the virus or didn't have the virus. And this was one of the biggest issues with law-abiding societies, where morality and self-responsibility can be put aside as long as you follow the law. And yet there are certain places in the world where rules and regulations are more like recommendations. And yet society completely functions. Let me tell you a little bit about Latin America.
Yo tengo tantos hermanos que no los puedo contar. En el valle, la montaña, en la paz.
So I was in Latin America during most of COVID. Now let me tell you something. Rules and regulations there, they're more like recommendations. Very few people follow them, right? One time I was in a taxi cab in Medellin and I was talking to the driver and we just sped past a red light. And I was like, is that normal? And he says, absolutely. In fact, after 10 o'clock, the robbers, they'll stop at these crossings and they'll take out a gun and loot you for everything you have. And that's why it's recommended to just keep your life and move on. In Mexico, I was there for about 3 months. And at first, the government obviously tried to impose lockdowns. In large cities like Guadalajara, Mexico City, they were quite successful. But I was living in the south in Chiapas, specifically San Cristobal de las Casas. Over there's a very large indigenous population. And they just said, well, who's going to pay us? The Tzotzil indigenous population, they needed to eat. They needed to continue their businesses. And the government just let them. Nothing bad happened over there. And that's why we actually recommend our clients to go to these Latin American, Caribbean countries, because there's always a way around rules and regulations that you just don't get in Europe. In Panama and in Colombia, they actually have a word called una rosca, or a plug. A person that you know who can get everything done. So if you have a bank that needs certain requirements, or if you're trying to get a specific action done with your company, it's always doable. There's always a way around it. So, whereas it's true that in Western Europe you have a lot more safety, you have more predictability, you are paying for it. And that's with your freedom. Places like Latin America, maybe even Southeast Asia, they're not the most reputable and, the cleanest places, but they do offer something that I think we have lost in most of countries.
Cada cual con sus trabajos, con sus sueños.
And also to have a community. And because they have a community over there, when it comes to police officers enforcing, for example, lockdowns, they lived in that place. They know the kids. So they know how ridiculous it is to keep them in an apartment building, stuck, cooped up for months. So when they did try to enforce it, for example, in the Dominican Republic, the police officers, they would just look the other way. I was in Santo Domingo. They actually almost wanted to create riots because of the lockdowns. You don't get that in Europe. Also, in these developing countries, it's quite easy to get access to farms and greenery, whereas here in a city life, what were you going to do during the pandemic with this small little garden? What you want to do is to find a place where you can relocate and actually enjoy open spaces. Land where you can grow your own vegetables, where you can grow your own food is extremely vital in today's day and age, especially if you're going to have another lockdown. That's it for today. If you enjoyed the content, you can hit the like button and subscribe. I'll be seeing you in a future presentation, but until then, bye-bye.
Que se llama libertad.